I'm Keith Olbermann, and this is The Resistance. Thank you, Mr. President-elect. Can you stand here today once and for all and say that no one connected to you or your campaign had any contact with Russia leading up to or during the presidential campaign? The essential question, the world-turning question, the impeachment question. And then the reporter kept talking. And if you do indeed believe that Russia was behind the hacking, what is your message to Vladimir Putin right now? And the ballgame was over. Trump got to filibuster for 321 words about how Russia would respect America when he's leading, and Hillary's reset button and the legal folder props and more of the poisoned word salad constantly being spun tableside in that addled mind of his. And he never answered the question. And his first news conference in 6 months came to an end. If the answer is yes, even in the slightest degree, his presidency comes to an end before it has begun, although it will linger indefinitely as the Republicans continue to put power ahead of country or democracy or even independence as a nation. And since Trump chose not to say that no one connected to him or his campaign had, as implied by the independent dossier, any contact with Russia leading up to or during the presidential campaign, we will have to answer it for him by circumstantial evidence. Michael Flynn, Trump's incoming national security advisor, former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, fired in 2014. The next year, he was paid to appear at a Kremlin-sponsored TV network's gala in Moscow and to sit a few seats from Vladimir Putin. The New York Times reports Mr. Flynn spoke to Russia's ambassador to this country this past December 28th, the day before this country announced new sanctions against Russia for its hacking of the Democratic National Committee. The Washington Post says Flynn and the ambassador spoke several times on the 29th. The international news agency Reuters say they spoke 5 times. There is a law in this country against individuals, even individuals who are soon to be part of a government, contradicting U.S. government foreign policy or dealing directly with enemy nations. And all we know about these calls is the Trump gang's claim that Flynn was setting up another phone call for Trump with Vladimir Putin. And unfortunately, the Trump gang has lately been handing out lies in carload lots. In December, 3 veteran intelligence professionals resigned from something called the Cambridge Intelligence Seminar at Cambridge University in England amid, quote, concerns that the seminar was funded through an intermediary by the Kremlin. One of its past speakers was Michael Flynn. Also that month, Bloomberg News reported that Flynn had partnered with a technology company, one of whose chiefs was, quote, once convicted of trying to sell stolen biotech material to the Russian KGB espionage agency, and the head of Austria's far-right Freedom Party, founded in the 1950s by former Nazis, signed what he has described as a cooperation agreement with Vladimir Putin's political party. And the Austrian said that a few weeks earlier he had met in New York with Michael Flynn. And then there's Flynn's boss. Separating the United States and Germany has been an avowed policy, perhaps the foremost foreign policy of Russia, since 1945. In a joint interview with the Times of London and the German newspaper Bild over the weekend, Trump called NATO obsolete and said the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, had made a catastrophic mistake by letting in, quote, illegals, and he threatened German automakers with huge tariffs. Meanwhile, Israeli media reports that the Israelis may not share intelligence with the Trump administration after American intelligence said, in essence, to them, don't give them anything you don't want to see end up in the hands of Iran via the Kremlin. After the revelation of the Trump dossier last week, BuzzFeed News quoted 2 Israeli intelligence officers, saying that their nation and at least 1 European country are separately investigating Trump's ties to, or his compromised vulnerability to, Russia. But wait, you're not sure about BuzzFeed's reporting now because they published the full Trump dossier, mistakes and false leads included, last week, right? A question. If that dossier had been about Bill Clinton, lurid details and all, and Donald Trump had a copy of it, and Donald Trump had read it aloud at his campaign rallies, who would have complained about all the television networks televising those rallies live? What news organizations refused to publish or broadcast Trump's wildest accusations or the material he read from WikiLeaks? Who waited until it could prove all those allegations and WikiLeaks were true? Correct. None of them did. In our new world in which reporters seek facts, but let the truth fall where it may, BuzzFeed was entirely right to publish that dossier. Besides which, the key to the dossier is not the perversions and the pee jokes, it's the money. To quote the impeccable BBC reporter Paul Wood, last April, the CIA director was shown intelligence that worried him. It was allegedly a tape recording of a conversation about money from the Kremlin going into the U.S. presidential campaign. This eventually led to the Department of Justice to get a warrant from the FISA court last October. They wanted permission to intercept the electronic records from 2 Russian banks. Ultimately, the investigation is looking for transfers of money from Russia to the United States, each one, if proved, a felony offense. A lawyer outside the Department of Justice, but familiar with the case, told me that 3 of Mr. Trump's associates were the subject of the inquiry. Quote, "But it's clear this is about Trump," unquote, he said. And Trump still defends Russia, or lumps it in with China, or just ignores the question. There is a hawkish blue dog Democrat, 7-term former California Congresswoman and ex-Undersecretary of State named Ellen Tauscher. 7 years ago, she negotiated the New START arms reduction treaty with the Russians. On January 7th, she summed this all up on Twitter. Quote, "POTUS is either traitorously ignoring Russia hacks and provocations or simply naive and weak commander-in-chief to be." So, Mr. Trump, let us ask you once again, can you stand here today once and for all and say that no one connected to you or your campaign had any contact with Russia leading up to or during the presidential campaign? And if you choose again not to answer, perhaps you should begin to formulate your answer to that question for the impeachment trial or the trial for espionage. Resist. Peace.